The man entered the restaurant like he owned the air inside it. He was tall, dressed in a perfectly pressed white robe, with a watch on his wrist that cost more than most people earned in years. Two assistants followed a step behind him, quiet and alert. The restaurant manager rushed forward with a forced smile, bowing slightly as he welcomed the guest. This was not an ordinary customer. Everyone could feel it. The restaurant was one of the finest in the city. Soft music played in the background. Crystal glasses reflected warm lights from the ceiling. People spoke in low voices, careful not to disturb the calm mood. When the man walked in, several diners looked up, sensing importance without fully knowing why. His confidence was heavy, almost loud, even though he barely spoke. He had traveled far for business meetings that had stretched his patience thin. Flights delayed. Deals slowed. People who wasted his time. He was used to things moving fast, bending to his will. Money had done that for him. Power had followed. Respect came automatically. Or at least, that was what he believed. The manager led him to a private table near the center of the room, a place usually reserved for high-profile guests. The man sat down without a word, scanning the space as if judging it. His assistants took their seats quietly. Menus were placed in front of them with care. Across the room, a young waitress adjusted the sleeves of her uniform. She had been working since early morning, her feet already aching, her back stiff from long hours. She noticed the sudden shift in the room's energy and looked over. She immediately knew this table would not be easy. She took a deep breath, picked up her notepad, and walked toward them with practiced calm. She had learned long ago to read people quickly. Some were kind. Some were impatient. Some looked right through you, as if you were part of the furniture. This man belonged to the last group. "Good evening," she said politely, her voice soft but clear. "May I take your order?" The man barely looked at her. He kept his eyes on the menu, flipping the pages slowly. One of his assistants whispered something to him, but he waved it off. "I don't have time for confusion," he said sharply, still not meeting her eyes. "Bring what you consider the best, and make sure it's done properly." She nodded. "Of course," she replied, writing quickly as she stood there, waiting in case he wanted more. He finally glanced up at her. His eyes passed over her face without interest. To him, she was just another worker, replaceable, forgettable. She stepped away and moved toward the kitchen. The manager watched her go, then looked back at the table, worry lining his face. He knew this type of guest. Powerful people expected perfection and often forgot kindness. The kitchen was busy. Orders were called out. Plates moved fast. She repeated the request carefully, double-checking every detail. She knew how one small mistake could turn into a big problem. When the food was ready, she carried the plates with steady hands. As she placed them on the table, one of the assistants leaned forward. "This is not what he asked for," the assistant said quietly but firmly. She looked down at her notes, then at the plate. "I'm sorry," she said. "Let me fix it right away." Before she could take the plate back, the man finally spoke again. This time, his voice was louder. "Is it so difficult to follow simple instructions?" He said, switching into Arabic, his tone sharp and mocking. "Or do they hire anyone who can walk these days?" The assistants exchanged brief glances. They smiled slightly, unsure whether to laugh or stay silent. The waitress froze for half a second. She understood every word, but she said nothing. She kept her face neutral, picked up the plate, and apologized again in English. "I'll bring the correct dish immediately," she said as she turned away. The man continued speaking in Arabic, his voice low but full of irritation. He did not think for a moment that she could understand him. "These people," he said, shaking his head. "No training. No pride in work. They smile, but there is nothing behind the eyes. One assistant nodded. Another let out a quiet chuckle. Nearby diners could sense something uncomfortable in the air. Some looked toward the table, then quickly away. No one wanted trouble. No one wanted to get involved. Behind the scenes, the waitress stood still near the kitchen entrance, holding the plate. Her hands trembled slightly, but she steadied them. Her chest felt tight, but she took slow breaths. This was not the first time she had been talked down to. It would not be the last. Still, something about the words cut deeper this time. Not because they were harsh, but because they were said so easily, as if her value had already been decided without a second thought. She corrected the order, checked it twice, and returned to the table. This time, she placed the dish carefully, making sure everything was perfect. "Here you are," she said calmly. The man glanced at the plate, then nodded once. He said nothing to her directly. Instead, he returned to his conversation in Arabic, talking about meetings, money, and people who disappointed him. His words flowed with confidence, filled with judgment and certainty. She stood there for a moment longer, then walked away. As she moved through the restaurant, she felt eyes on her. Some were curious. Some were sympathetic. Others were simply tired like her. She focused on her work, delivering drinks, clearing tables, keeping her posture straight. But inside, her mind was far away. She remembered classrooms filled with books, long nights of study, and years spent learning languages not just to speak them, but to understand the people behind them. She remembered places she had lived, moments when she had been treated as an equal, even as a voice worth listening to. Life had changed since then. Circumstances had shifted. She now wore a uniform instead of professional clothes. She served food instead of ideas. But she was still herself. At the table, the man laughed loudly at something his assistant said. He seemed relaxed now, satisfied. The earlier irritation had faded. In his mind, the problem had been solved, that he had no idea that the quiet woman moving between tables carried a world he could not see. The evening continued. Plates were cleared. Desserts were ordered. The restaurant buzzed softly with conversation and clinking glasses. To most people, it was just another night. But under the calm surface, something was building. Not anger, not revenge, just a quiet decision forming, steady and patient. The waitress passed the table one more time. The man spoke again in Arabic, making another careless remark. Another small insult thrown without effort. This time, she did not flinch. She simply listened and waited. The night moved forward, slow on the surface, heavy underneath. The restaurant stayed full, but the mood around that central table felt tight, like a string pulled too far. The man leaned back in his chair now, speaking with ease, his earlier frustration replaced by a calm sense of control. He cut his food carefully, tasted it, and nodded with approval. To him, the issue was done. The waitress continued her work, moving from table to table. She refilled glasses, cleared plates, and answered small questions with polite smiles. Her body stayed busy, but her mind kept returning to that table. Not because she wanted trouble, but because she had been placed in a position she knew too well. Every word he spoke in Arabic reached her clearly. The accent, the tone, the meaning behind the words. He spoke as if the language itself protected him, as if it created a wall no one else could cross. That false sense of safety gave him confidence. She looked confused, he said quietly, smiling to himself. Probably doesn't even know where she is. One of the assistants nodded. They never do, he replied. She stood behind the bar for a moment, pretending to organize glasses. Her face remained calm. Anyone watching would see nothing unusual. But inside, she felt something steady rise. Not anger, not shame, but awareness. a clear understanding of the moment she was standing in. She had learned long ago that reacting too fast only gave power away. Silence, when chosen, could be stronger. The manager passed by and glanced at her. His eyes held a question, but he said nothing. He had noticed the tension earlier. He had also noticed her restraint. In this line of work, people learn to read what was not spoken. The man called for another drink. She approached the table again, holding the tray carefully. As she placed the glass in front of him, he continued speaking in Arabic without pause, his voice smooth, casual. "Money makes life simple," he said. "People become simpler too." She stood there just long enough to be sure the glass was steady. Then she nodded slightly and stepped away. A few tables over, a couple watched the scene quietly. The woman leaned toward her partner and whispered something. He shook his head gently, signaling her not to get involved. That was how it usually went. People saw, but they stayed still. In the kitchen, the noise was louder. Orders stacked up. Someone dropped a spoon. Another cook laughed. Life continued at its usual speed, unaware of the quiet moment growing outside. She leaned against the counter briefly, closing her eyes for just a second. Images came to her without effort. A small apartment filled with books. Long evenings spent translating pages line by line. Teachers who had once praised her understanding of language, not just words, but meaning. She remembered being told that language carried responsibility. She opened her eyes and straightened her shoulders. Back at the table, the man checked his phone, scrolling through messages from business partners across the world. Numbers, contracts, schedules. Everything measured. Everything controlled. He looked up and gestured for the bill, already knowing it would be paid without thought. The manager approached with careful steps. "Is everything to your satisfaction?" he asked. "Yes," the man replied in English, polite and smooth. "Much better now." The manager nodded, relief washing over his face. He glanced briefly toward the waitress, then back to the guest. "We are glad to hear that." As the manager walked away, the man leaned closer to his assistants and spoke again in Arabic, his voice softer, almost amused. "See how they bow," he said. "Respect is natural when people know their place." This time, one assistant laughed quietly. The waitress was nearby, arranging silverware. Her hands paused for a moment, then continued. She did not look up, but her breathing changed, slow and deliberate. She thought about all the times she had been underestimated, not just here, but in life. Times when people decided who she was before she spoke. She had learned to survive those moments by becoming smaller. Tonight, she felt something different. Not a desire to fight, but a refusal to disappear. Another table needed attention. She served them quickly, efficiently. Her movements were smooth, confident. No one could say she was careless or slow. The man stood up to use the restroom. As he passed her, he glanced at her again, briefly. His eyes held no recognition, no curiosity, just indifference. He returned to his table moments later, settling back into his seat. Dessert menus arrived. He waved them away. "Just coffee," he said. She brought the coffee herself. As she placed the cup down, he looked at her more closely this time. Maybe it was the quiet way she moved. Maybe it was the calm in her face. Something caught his attention, just for a second. He frowned slightly, then dismissed the thought. As she walked away, he spoke again in Arabic, lower now, as if sharing a private joke. "They all look the same after a while," he said. "Different faces, same emptiness." Her steps slowed for a fraction of a second. Then she continued. At another table, an elderly man dropped his fork. She bent down quickly to pick it up and offered a fresh one with a warm smile. "No worries," she said. "It happens." The man thanked her sincerely. That small moment grounded her. It reminded her that kindness still existed, even if it was quiet. Time passed. The bill was placed on the table. The assistants reviewed it. The man signed without looking at the amount. He leaned back again, satisfied, ready to leave. The manager returned, thanking him repeatedly. The assistant stood. Chairs scraped softly against the floor. The waitress watched from a distance. She felt the moment approaching, like a door slowly opening. She did not plan a scene. She did not plan a speech. She only knew that she would not carry the weight of his words home with her Dot as they prepared to leave. One assistant asked a final question in Arabic, something light, something careless. The man answered, smiling. She was close enough to hear everything. She took one step forward. Her heart beat steadily. Not fast, not slow, just firm. She spoke quietly, clearly, in perfect Arabic. Her voice was calm, respectful, and steady. "Sir," she said, "I hope your evening was pleasant. I wish you safe travels." The words landed like silence breaking glass. Dot. The man stopped moving. One assistant froze. The other turned sharply toward her. The manager, a few steps away, looked up in confusion. For the first time since he had entered the restaurant, the man truly looked at her. Dot. His smile faded. He did not speak. The room seemed to hold its breath. She met his eyes without challenge, without fear, just presence. Dot. And in that moment, he understood. She had heard everything. Dot. And she had chosen when to speak. The silence did not break right away. It stretched, thin and heavy, filling the space between them. The man stood still, his hand resting on the back of his chair. His assistants looked from him to the waitress, unsure of what to do next. The low sounds of the restaurant continued around them, but at that table, time felt paused. Dot. He searched her face, as if trying to place her. A waitress was not supposed to speak to him like that. Not in that language. Not with that calm. "You speak Arabic," he said at last. His voice was controlled, but something beneath it had shifted. "Yes," she replied gently. "I do." One of the assistants cleared his throat, uncomfortable. The other took a small step back. The manager hovered nearby, sensing that something important was happening, but not fully understanding it. The man straightened his posture. His pride urged him to brush it off, to laugh, to turn it into nothing. But the look in her eyes stopped him. There was no sarcasm there, no challenge, only quiet certainty. "How long?" he asked, his tone sharp again, as if reclaiming ground. "How long have you understood what was said?" She did not answer right away. She chose her words carefully, not because she was afraid, but because she respected the weight of the moment. "From the beginning," she said. The words landed softly, but their meaning was heavy. One assistant's face flushed. The other looked down at the floor. The man exhaled slowly through his nose. For the first time that evening, he felt exposed. Everything he had said, every careless remark, every judgment spoken freely, now stood between them. "And you said nothing," he replied. She nodded. "I was doing my job." A few diners nearby had started to notice the stillness, the way people were watching instead of eating. Conversations lowered. Forks paused mid-air. The man crossed his arms. "So," he said, "you waited until now to make a point?" She shook her head slightly. "No, I waited until you were leaving." He frowned. "Why?" "Because I did not want to embarrass you," she said honestly. That answer caught him off guard. He had expected anger. He had expected blame. He had expected a performance. What he did not expect was restraint. He let out a short laugh, more confused than amused. "You think I would be embarrassed by this?" She met his gaze. "I think you already are." The words were calm, but they carried truth. A truth that did not shout. a truth that did not need to. His jaw tightened. For a brief moment, it looked like he might snap back, raise his voice, remind her who he was. But something held him back. Maybe it was the eyes watching now. Maybe it was the clear dignity in front of him. "Who are you?" he asked. She considered the question. It was simple, yet layered. She did not list degrees or past titles. She did not explain everything. She knew she did not owe him her story. "I am someone who understands words," she said, "and the weight they carry." He glanced at his assistants. Neither met his eyes. The balance he was used to, the silent agreement that placed him above others, felt unsteady. "You chose to work here," he said, his voice quieter now. "Why?" "Because life does not always move in straight lines," she replied. "And because work is honest, no matter where it is done." The manager took a hesitant step forward. "Is everything all right?" he asked carefully. The man raised a hand, stopping him. "Yes," he said. Then he paused. "No, not entirely." The manager froze. Unsure. The man turned back to her. "You heard criticism," he said. "You heard judgment." "Yes. And still you served." "Yes. Why?" She took a breath. "Because respect does not depend on how others behave. It depends on how I choose to behave." There was no pride in her voice. No lesson delivered with force. Just truth, spoken plainly. The room felt different now. People were openly watching. No phones were raised. No one whispered. It was not drama they were seeing, but something rarer. The man's shoulders lowered slightly. The tension he carried all evening seemed to loosen. He rubbed his temple, a small gesture that revealed fatigue. "I have been surrounded by people who agree with me for a long time," he said slowly. "They laugh when I expect them to. They stay quiet when I speak." She listened without interrupting. "They never correct me," he continued. "Never remind me." She nodded once. "Language has a way of revealing who we believe we are." He looked at her sharply. "And what do you believe I think I am?" She did not hesitate. "Untouchable." The word hung between them. For a moment, it seemed like too much. His face hardened, then softened again, as if he were arguing with himself. Finally, he let out a slow breath. "Perhaps," he said. One of the assistants shifted uncomfortably. "Sir," he murmured, "the car is waiting." The man ignored him. "You could have humiliated me," he said to her. "In front of everyone." "Yes," she replied. "I could have, but you didn't." "No. Why speak at all, then?" She looked around the room briefly. At the people watching. At the tables filled with strangers. At the space she had moved through all night unseen. "Because silence can protect," she said. "But it can also allow harm to continue. I chose a moment that would not turn this into a scene." The man studied her as if seeing her clearly for the first time. "Not as a waitress. Not as an employee. But as a person with boundaries. I assumed," he said quietly, "that you would not understand." She smiled faintly. "Many people assume that." He nodded, accepting the truth of it. The manager stood nearby, hands clasped, unsure whether to interrupt or step back. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He placed it on the table, then paused. Slowly, he pushed it aside. "This is not about money," he said. She appreciated that more than he knew. "I spoke carelessly," he continued. "I spoke without thinking who might hear." "Yes," she said. "You did. I won't excuse it," he added after a moment. "I was wrong." The word sounded unfamiliar coming from him, but it was there, real, unforced. A quiet murmur rippled through the nearby tables. Not gossip, recognition. He looked at her again. "You did not raise your voice. You did not insult me back." "There was no need," she replied. He nodded slowly. You have given me something tonight that few people do. And what is that? She asked. A mirror, he said. He picked up his jacket and placed it over his arm. His assistant straightened, unsure how to follow this new version of him. He hesitated, then spoke once more, his voice lower, meant only for her. I am sorry, he said. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. But it was sincere. She inclined her head slightly. Thank you for saying that. He turned to leave, then stopped again. One more thing, he said. She waited. You corrected my grammar earlier, he said. Very gently. A small smile touched her lips. Old habit. He nodded, almost smiling himself. Then he walked away. As the doors closed behind him, the restaurant slowly returned to its rhythm. Conversations resumed. Glasses clinked again. But something had changed. The manager approached her, his expression full of relief and surprise. Are you all right? He asked. Yes, she said. He nodded. You handled that with grace. She thanked him quietly and returned to her work. As she cleared the now empty table, she noticed something left behind. Not money, not a card. Just silence. And for the first time that evening, it felt peaceful. The rush of the moment faded slowly, like a wave pulling back into the sea. The doors had closed behind the man and his assistants, but the feeling he left behind stayed in the room. People returned to their meals, though some still glanced toward the empty table. It was not curiosity anymore. It was thought. The waitress cleared the plates quietly, stacking them with care. Her hands moved the way they always did, steady and practiced. From the outside, nothing about her had changed. She wore the same uniform. She followed the same steps. But inside, something felt lighter. The manager approached again, this time with a softer expression. You can take a short break if you want, he said gently. You handled a difficult situation. She nodded in thanks, but shook her head. I'm okay, she said. And she meant it. She took the plates to the kitchen. The noise there wrapped around her like a familiar blanket. Pans clattered. Someone joked loudly. Another server complained about sore feet. Life went on, simple and ordinary. One of her coworkers leaned toward her. What was that about? She whispered. He looked shocked. The waitress smiled faintly. Just a conversation, she said. Her coworker raised an eyebrow, but did not push. Everyone had their stories. Some were shared. Some were not. She washed her hands and stood for a moment by the sink, watching the water run. Her reflection stared back at her from the steel surface. Tired eyes. Calm face. A woman who had learned to carry many versions of herself. When she returned to the floor, a few guests smiled at her. One older woman nodded with quiet approval. A young man whispered something to his partner and glanced her way, respectful. No one clapped. No one made a scene. And she was grateful for that. Later, during a slower moment, she stood near the window, looking out at the street. The city lights blurred together, cars passing, people rushing somewhere else. She thought about how easily paths crossed, how one evening could hold so much weight. She remembered another city, years ago, where she had walked into lecture halls instead of dining rooms, where her days were filled with books, discussions, and long debates about culture and meaning, where Arabic had not been a tool of surprise, but a language of study and respect. She had fallen in love with it slowly. The structure, the poetry, the care required to truly speak it well. She had learned that words could build bridges or burn them down. That fluency was not just about sound, but about understanding. Life had changed after that. Family responsibilities, financial pressure, decisions that could not be delayed. She had taken a job that paid the bills, telling herself it was temporary. Then time moved on, as it always does. She had not failed. She had adapted. A table called for service. She went to them, listened carefully, smiled, and delivered what they needed. To her, this was not lesser work. It was honest. It was real. Near closing time, the restaurant grew quieter. Chairs were stacked. Candles were blown out. The hum of the place softened into a tired calm. She wiped down counters and helped reset tables for the next day. The manager called her into his office briefly. He closed the door and leaned against the desk. "I want you to know," he said, choosing his words carefully, "that I'm proud of how you handled yourself tonight." "Thank you," she said. He hesitated. "If you ever want to move into another role here," he added, "training, guest relations, anything like that, let me know." She appreciated the offer, truly. But she did not answer right away. "I'll think about it," she said. He nodded, understanding more than she expected. When her shift ended, she changed out of her uniform and stepped into the cool night air. The street felt different after the warmth of the restaurant. Quieter, more honest. She walked toward the bus stop, her bags slung over her shoulder. As she waited, she replayed the evening in her mind. Not with pride, not with regret, just with clarity. She had not spoken to prove anything. She had spoken because silence would have stayed with her longer. Because dignity mattered, even in small moments. A bus arrived. She took a seat by the window and watched the city slide past. Neon signs, closed shops, late-night walkers with tired faces. Everyone carrying something unseen. She thought about the man, about the look on his face when understanding reached him. She did not hate him. She did not wish him harm. She hoped quietly that the mirror she had held up would stay with him longer than the embarrassment. She reached her stop and stepped off, walking the last few blocks home. The building was modest. The hallway lights flickered as usual. She climbed the stairs and unlocked her door. Inside, her apartment was small but clean. Books lined one wall, stacked neatly. Some were old textbooks. Some were novels in different languages. She ran her fingers along their spines as she passed. She made herself tea and sat by the window, letting the steam rise. The night was still. Somewhere far away, a siren sounded, then faded. She opened one of her books and read a few lines, more out of habit than focus. The words felt familiar, comforting. Her phone buzzed with a message from a family member, asking about her day. She replied simply, "Long, but fine." She did not mention the restaurant. She did not mention the man. Some things did not need explanation. As she prepared for bed, she caught her reflection again, this time in the bathroom mirror. She looked the same, but she stood a little straighter. The next morning came quickly. Another shift. Another set of tables. Another chance to move quietly through the world. But something had shifted. Even if no one else could see it, she understood now that her story did not need a stage. That strength did not need volume. That sometimes the most powerful moments happened between breaths, and wherever life took her next, she would carry that truth with her. The days that followed felt ordinary on the surface, but the memory of that night stayed close. Not heavy, not dramatic, just present, like a quiet reminder that some moments settle into you and change how you stand. She returned to work the next evening as usual. Same uniform, same routine. She tied her apron, checked the floor, and greeted her coworkers with small nods and tired smiles. No one mentioned what had happened. The restaurant did not thrive on stories. It thrived on consistency. Still, she noticed small things. A coworker asked her opinion on a guest issue instead of guessing. The manager trusted her judgment without double-checking. These were not rewards. They were signs of respect. Subtle, but real. A few nights later, during a slower hour, the front doors opened again. The sound caught her attention, but she did not look up right away. People came and went all the time. Then she felt the shift in the room. That same pause and energy. She looked up. The man stood near the entrance, alone this time. No assistance. No rush. He wore simpler clothes now, still expensive, but less formal. He scanned the room briefly, then his eyes found her. He did not smile. He did not frown. He simply nodded. She felt no shock, no fear. Just curiosity. The manager hurried forward, surprised. "Welcome," he said, unsure. "Would you like a table?" "Yes," the man replied. His voice was calm. "But first, I would like a moment." The manager glanced at the waitress, then stepped aside. The man approached her slowly, stopping at a respectful distance. He did not look around to see who was watching. His focus stayed on her. "I hope I am not interrupting," he said. "You're not," she replied. He hesitated, as if choosing words carefully, something she suspected he did not often do. "I've thought about our conversation," he said. "More than I expected." She listened without speaking. "I have lived a life where people react to me, not with me," he continued. "That night showed me something uncomfortable and necessary." She nodded once. "I did not come to explain myself," he said, "or to justify anything. I came to say thank you for listening," she replied gently. "That's all anyone can do." He gave a small, thoughtful smile. "You are right." He glanced around the restaurant, then back at her. "I would like a table, and if possible, I would like you to serve it. Only if you are comfortable." She considered the request, not because she was afraid, but because she valued choice. Then she nodded. "I can do that," she said. The evening passed quietly. He ordered simply. He spoke politely. When she served him, he looked at her, truly looked, and said thank you each time. No extra words. No performance. At the end of the meal, he paid and left a generous tip, but she noticed something else. A short note folded carefully beside the receipt. It read, "Your dignity taught me more than any boardroom ever has." She folded the note and placed it in her pocket. She did not reread it. She did not share it. It was enough to know it existed. Life moved forward. Weeks passed. Seasons shifted. She accepted a new role at the restaurant, helping train new staff. She was patient with them, especially the ones who doubted themselves. She taught them how to listen, how to stay calm, how to remember that work did not define worth. Sometimes guests spoke sharply. Sometimes people looked past her. She handled it all with the same steady presence. She had learned that not every moment required a response. But when one did, she would know. She enrolled in evening classes again, slowly, carefully, balancing work and study. Languages returned to her life, not as a reminder of what she had lost, but as a bridge to where she was going. One evening, after a long shift, she stood outside the restaurant and watched people pass. Faces lit by phone screens. Couples arguing softly. Friends laughing loudly. Everyone wrapped in their own story. She understood now that real power was quiet, that it did not need witnesses, that it lived in choices made when no one demanded them. She walked home with steady steps, carrying nothing heavy. Not anger, not pride, just clarity. Somewhere in the city, the man returned to his world of meetings and decisions. But now, when he spoke, he paused. He noticed who was listening. He chose his words with care, not because he feared being corrected again, but because he understood that respect was not automatic. It was earned in small moments. They did not cross paths again. They did not need to. Their lives had touched briefly, then moved apart, each carrying something forward. A lesson, a reminder, a quiet shift, and that was enough.